She was supposed to be just a girl who skated, a quiet kid from the Bay Area who loved her cats, hunted for vintage finds at thrift stores, and, oh yeah, became the youngest US figure skating champion in 86 years at the age of 13. But somewhere between the Olympic podium and the front page of ESPN, something changed. And in a recent sit-down, Alysa Liu said something that stopped everyone in their tracks. "I don't really know what being famous means for me yet." Hold on, because what comes next might completely change how you see Olympic athletes and the hidden cost of becoming famous before you're even old enough to drive. Here's what most people don't know about Alysa Liu. When the cameras aren't rolling, she isn't rehearsing victory speeches or doing brand deals. She's crouching on the floor of a thrift store, rifling through a rack of old jackets with no makeup on, looking for something no one else noticed. That image, an Olympic-level figure skater hunting for a $7 flannel, tells you something about who she really is, and it's the thing that makes her story so different from every other celebrity athlete narrative you've seen before. Because Alysa Liu didn't choose celebrity, celebrity chose her. Let's go back to the beginning, because to understand where she is now, this complicated, fascinating space between kid and icon, you have to understand where this all started. Alysa was born in Fremont, California. Her father, Arthur Liu, introduced her to figure skating as a young child, and from the very first moment she hit the ice, it was obvious something extraordinary was happening. She was fast. She was precise. She could do things that skaters twice her age couldn't even attempt. By 13, she had landed quad jumps, 4 rotation jumps that most women don't even try, and won the US Figure Skating Championship. 13 years old, younger than most high schoolers, younger, in fact, than the national champion record that had stood since 1937. The world noticed. ESPN put her on their radar, Sports Illustrated followed, and suddenly this quiet, cat-obsessed thrift store kid from the Bay Area was everywhere. But here's where the story gets complicated, and here's what nobody was talking about. What does it actually feel like to become a public figure before you have any real idea of who you are as a person? In interviews around her Olympic journey, including her experience representing the United States, Alysa has been remarkably honest about this tension. She talks about competing not just against the world's best athletes, but against the impossible weight of expectation, the crushing pressure of performing on the biggest stage in sports, while still being, in so many ways, a teenager figuring it all out. She didn't win gold at the Olympics, but what she said after, the composure, the grace, the self-awareness, revealed something more valuable than a medal. "I want to grow. I want to figure out who I am outside of skating." Those words hit differently when you realize she said them at an age when most of us were still figuring out what classes to take. And this is where the cats come in. Stay with me here. In a genuinely charming recent interview, Alysa opened up about her life away from the rink, the things that ground her, the things that make her feel like a person and not a brand. Her cats. Real, actual cats. The kind she talks to, takes photos of, and clearly adores with the unfiltered enthusiasm of someone who hasn't been media trained into a corporate version of herself. And then there's the thrifting. Alysa Liu goes to thrift stores, not as an aesthetic, not for content, but because she genuinely loves it. The hunt, the randomness, the idea that you can find something brilliant hiding in a pile that everyone else walked past. There's a metaphor in there if you're paying attention, and I think you are. Here's something that very few people are willing to say out loud about the world of elite figure skating and youth celebrity. The system is designed to produce champions. It is not designed to protect the person inside the champion. Young athletes in America, particularly in aesthetic sports like figure skating and gymnastics, are elevated to national hero status at an age when their brains are still literally developing. The lifestyle, the media attention, the sponsorship machinery, it can reshape a person before they've even had a chance to decide who they want to be. What makes Alysa Liu different, and this is the part that should genuinely inspire you, is that she seems to be navigating it with her eyes wide open. She talks about needing space, about not wanting to define herself entirely by her sport, about being a person first and an athlete second. That kind of self-awareness is rare. It's rare in adults. In a 19-year-old who's been famous since middle school, it's extraordinary. Here's where her story stands right now, and why it matters beyond figure skating. Alysa Liu represents a new generation of American athletes who are pushing back against the old model, the model that says you owe the public everything, that your story belongs to your sponsors, that your identity is your medal count. She is choosing quietly and deliberately to be something more complicated and more human than that. She's building a life that includes skating, but isn't only skating. She's letting herself like things, cats, thrift stores, ordinary Saturdays, without apologizing for it. And in a world saturated with perfectly curated celebrity content, that kind of authentic messiness is, ironically, the most compelling thing you can offer an audience. There's a moment in sports history. You can find parallels with Simone Biles, with Naomi Osaka, with so many athletes of this generation, where the person inside the champion finally speaks up and says, "I am not just your symbol." I think Alysa Liu is quietly building toward that moment, and when it fully arrives, and it will, it's going to be one of the most powerful chapters in American sports. Because here's the truth about Alysa Liu that the headlines miss. She is not a skating robot. She is not a brand. She is a brilliant, layered, still becoming person who happens to be one of the best figure skaters in the world. And the fact that she still goes to thrift stores, talks to her cats, and looks genuinely puzzled by the concept of celebrity, that's not a quirk. That's the whole story. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've ever felt the tension between who you are and who the world expects you to be, then you already understand what makes Alysa Liu so worth paying attention to. Drop a comment below. Do you think young athletes like Alysa Liu get enough protection from the pressures of early fame? I want to hear your take. And if this kind of story, real, human, beyond the highlight reel, is what you're here for, hit subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of content we make.